Welcome to our show. My name is Frank Bartscheck. If you ask any journalist what drew them to their chosen occupation, many describe it as a calling or explain how they couldn't envision their life without practicing the craft they love. However, working as a journalist in Egypt presents a plethora of difficulties. Many within the population, as well as the government, distrust journalists. There is the risk of arrest as well as potential violence, just to name a few. As a result, the growing ranks of female journalists within Egypt face additional daunting hurdles, including challenges to their equal rights, inter-office gender barriers, harassment, or sexual violence. These struggles are often underreported and, in many cases, not reported at all. This leaves many with a sense of powerlessness. However, the landscape seems to be changing. Conversations regarding these topics are starting to openly occur. Recently, Deutsche Welle Academy convened 16 Egyptian female journalists to explore the difficult issues women face. Other conferences are being convened throughout Egypt as well. Interestingly, the Deutsche Welle conference provided the platform for the establishment of the Union of Media Women in Egypt, which aims to bring women journalists together to assist each other. We're here today to discuss these issues and individual experiences with three fantastic journalists. Alia is a journalist for Shorouk newspaper. She is the head of the civil society department at the newspaper, which has her managing a team of 5 reporters that cover civil society and human rights issues on a daily basis. Bassant Aldin is a journalist in the foreign affairs department at Masry Youm. She is also a senior translator who has traveled the world extensively to cover stories for Masry Youm, including her coverage of the American 2013 presidential election. She is also one of the main co-founders of the recently formed Union of Egyptian Women in Media. Lindey Parietti is one of the founders of Mada. She formerly worked at Egyptian Independent and Reuters Global Broadcast Services and is currently a freelance journalist who works with the AP and other media outlets. Having spent over 5 years in Cairo, she has a unique perspective of what a foreign journalist goes through, having covered several events that Egypt has recently witnessed. Thank you all very much for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Alia, I'll begin with you. What is it that drew you to journalism?
Actually, I didn't plan to be a journalist. I mainly studied Spanish language. It was my major. And then I started working in a Middle Eastern news agency in the economic department. And my boss then, he found something that I didn't see in myself, and he started to encourage me. And I like it because it's an unusual job. You meet different people. It's not something that you just sit on a desk. It makes your mind changing every second, so it's challenging.
Yeah. And Bassant, what drew you to journalism?
Actually, it was my secondary school. The degree that I had, I wanted to be a pharmacist, first of all. Then the degree I had, I went to the media school, the faculty. Then I just passed all over the grades with excellent grade, and I found that I'm doing well in this area. Then I joined the Masr since I graduated in 2009 till now, and I have been just being working in some departments, civil society, the local news, and I ended up in the foreign affairs department. Then I found that yes, people need some kind of bridges between the government and people to transfer the ideas and so on. But as a female journalist, I had some problems with dealing with people on the street. That's why I ended up in the foreign affairs department, which is just having phone calls, translations, and so on. And also the foreign affairs issue is not truly or totally covered in Egyptian media.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Lindsay, how about yourself? What drew you to journalism?
Initially, I studied political reporting in Boston because I like the idea of holding public officials accountable. But as I've broadened the topics that I cover, I also like what Alia mentioned, that you almost get to try a different job every day depending on the topics that you cover, and you get to learn a little bit about everything.
And what are some of the difficult issues? Obviously, as a foreign journalist, you face some unique challenges here in Egypt. What are some of the experiences that you've had that you found challenging?
Well, obviously, as a foreign journalist, you can almost never blend in looking like I do. So while you're covering the story, sometimes you also become the story. It's very hard to be anonymous and impartial and remove that personal experience from what you're covering. I think that's probably the biggest challenge, along with the security concerns that everyone faces, except for that, whereas they might be able to blend in as a citizen just observing something, obviously I'm always going to stick out.
Have you ever experienced any sort of situation where you felt not just uncomfortable but threatened that, with your security?
Yeah, there were many times in Tahrir during the revolution and during protests and other places where I felt quite unsafe. Thankfully, nothing drastic ever happened to me as it has to other journalists, foreign and Egyptian. But yeah, there are many times when I've felt threatened either by people, protesters, or police.
Now, Alia, Lindsay brings up an interesting point. As a foreign journalist, it's more difficult to blend in. Do you find that as a female journalist, do you encounter situations where it's difficult to blend in, even though you are Egyptian?
Yes, sure. It depends on the people I'm dealing with in the street. Some people would be cooperative and talk to me, whether I'm a male or a female. Sometimes it's better to be a female in some situations. The female is easier to deal with the people. Some other people, they would refuse whether male or female because there's this suspicious perspective all the time, and of course the security issues. If the police in the street know that I'm a journalist, he would ask me, "Where is your permission? What are you doing here? Why did you come here?" And so it's and of course there's the harassment sometimes. So it depends on how you deal with the situation, how I deal with the situation. I have to show that I'm really strong and I'm not afraid, even I'm shaking from inside, but I have to show that I don't care.
Well, what I guess for aspiring journalists, what tips would you give in order to best navigate those types of situations? Obviously, they're extremely difficult to deal with. What do you do that allows you to not fall prey to these awful potentials?
First of all, I would explore the circumstances I'm working in. If I'm working in the street, it's different from going to a conference or, like Bassant said, dealing with foreign affairs and embassies. In the street, I have to explore the situation, the people. I would just behave like an ordinary person asking about something, and step by step I will know what I'm doing. If the people I'm talking to, I find them that they are behaving in a good way, I would start to telling them that I'm a journalist and I want to know so and so. First I need to assure them that I'm not doing anything that's against law or anything. And of course to have self-confidence. Yes, that's the most important thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Bassant, how about yourself? Have you encountered any situations that,
In the street?
At any point in time during reporting?
I only covered one demonstration in my life. It wasn't, and it wasn't the first and the last, because what I had faced in that day, it wasn't the 28th of the January revolution after the 25, so it was a Friday of Ferry, then Agumat al-Ghadab in our language. So it was an awful day for me, and it was just a harsh experience for myself and for my home, my family. I got fainted in the street, and the people know that I'm a journalist because I was wearing this stuff, safety stuff and everything, so I was apparently prepared to cover. So I'm not just a protester, if I am, but and I'm writing and I'm having a camera, so it was a disaster experience. Then I found that I could not deal with this. I found that it's very hard in Egypt to do this. But on the other hand, when I have been to Washington, there is some protests that had been during a 2-month period were covering the presidential elections, but it wasn't that hard. And I was covering conferences and some street protests and everything, and I was Egyptian and with veil and Muslim and everything, but I didn't had so much harsh experience with people and everything. But
you raise an interesting point. The differences between covering in Egypt and covering in the West.
Yeah.
You say it was hard here and it wasn't hard in the U.S. Can you provide maybe some specific examples of what the differences were in your perspective?
Okay, I went once also here in Egypt to cover the parliamentary elections, and it was also hard because there is so much jam and people and so much pushing in the way and no care that I am a female or woman or anything, not just a journalist, but you are a female, so everyone to punch you and everything, no sorry, nothing. On the other hand, in Washington, I went to a polling station, and I stand in the QU that I am a Muslim woman or I am an American and I want to vote, and I just pulled in the QU and they had my photographer also, and we had nothing. And then when it comes my role or my turn to go into the polling station, I just pretended that I had a phone call or anything and moved around. I wanted to experience how it's going and how the arrangement of the process and how organized it is. And I asked some people, what you're going to elect, Romney or Obama and anything. And the photographer asked to go into the polling stations to have some photos to capture it, and they will welcome it. Just do not capture what the people are voting for, just the legs and everything. There was some black curtains and so on. So that's different.
And I mentioned in the opening the new union of media women in Egypt.
Yeah.
You're one of the co-founders of that.
Yes.
What inspired you to establish this new group?
We needed the need to do it. The need that female journalists need some support. Some people, as Alia said, they are lack of self-confidence. When the female journalists just win in the street, they know that the man or the other colleague journalist, male, he would cover, he would run, the people would welcome him to give some statements and so on, but she is not, especially if she is a young or a junior journalist. And the faculties now, especially the governmental faculty, they are not having a practical stuff to cover in the street and so on. So we had the idea that we are the seniors, or we have some enough experience to practice these people, to train them, to have them that it's too easy. You just need a special advice or just a light consultancy with us and some professional experts in some different fields to provide you with. So we had the idea that we have to do something for these females that to prevent them to go through what we had been through, just to help them to overcome all these issues, and when go to the street or in the conferences or anything, and just do your job with just full of confidence, and it would be so easier for you. And anything would you need legal support or psychological support, we will do it for you.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how many members are in the group right now?
Now we are 5 main co-founders, but we have like 500 volunteers.
Wow.
And we have 20 of the famous anchors and pioneers from women media. And on Facebook, we have like now more than 5,000 followers.
Wow.
Yeah.
And Lindey, as not only a female journalist in Egypt, but a foreign journalist, some of those experiences you described in Tahrir, which I'm sure were extremely scary, what were some of the things that you did to avoid, falling prey to these things? What sort of tips would you provide to aspiring journalists? Maybe people from the union are watching right now. What would you say to them to provide advice?
Well, definitely in the protest type situations or situations where it might attract a mob, never to go out without a colleague, especially for me because I'm a videographer. When I'm carrying a camera, you definitely have to have someone watching your back, because when you're concentrating on the camera itself, you're not as easily able to assess the situation building around you. And unfortunately, I have to say that I found it really helps if that colleague is a man, or that you take a man with you, an Egyptian man in my case. Other than that, just continually reassess the situation, and if you start to feel uncomfortable, follow your gut instincts and get out. No story is worth your life or some serious damage or a sexual assault. Don't let editors pressure you into covering a story that you feel very uncomfortable covering. I think Bassant mentioned something important. She tried covering a demonstration once and she found that that experience wasn't for her. Don't feel like you have to be a political or a street protest reporter if that's not what you're good at. Find some other niche in the market that you can pursue.
And Alia, oftentimes one thing that I in my research I've noted, a lot of female journalists state that they feel a lot of pressure to cover kind of women issues, that they're not provided the opportunity to cover more hard issues, yet you've escaped these pressures. What route did you take to kind of circumvent these societal pressures?
Actually, I don't see this much, whether when I used to work in the state-owned news agency MENA or now in the Shorouk newspaper. I remember when we started in the Shorouk newspaper, the number of female journalists actually overpassed the number of male journalists.
Oh, wow.
And they were and still covering all kind of topics, political, economic, and environmental, all kind of. I just remember one situation on the same day, the 28th of January, Friday of Anger, when our editor said that no female journalists will go to cover these demonstrations. It's dangerous for them and they are not allowed. And then there was this rage within the females because they said it's not our first time to cover a demonstration, and no, we are just like males. And I remember that at this time the head of the civil society department, at this time her name was Dina Gamil, she said no, they are going to cover it, and they did, and it was one of the best coverage at this time. Maybe what you're saying is more in the state-owned newspapers and news agencies, but still now this is changing because women now are more confident. They want to show that they can do whatever they want, and actually they have more skills. Like they learn languages more easier than male. They are ready to go in kind of relatively dangerous situations to prove that they can do it. So it's changing now in Egypt. And I was lucky that I started with economy and diplomatic, and now political and human rights. So it's.
And Bassant, Alia actually brought up an interesting point. You work for Masr Youm, which isn't necessarily state-owned, but has some state influence. Have you ever felt that sort of pressure to cover kind of more women's issues, to stay away from the harder topics? Because that was definitely a reoccurring thing that I came across in my research.
The report that had been issued yesterday, I don't remember the human rights group, about police and sexual violence.
Federal of
that
Human
was
Rights.
the International Federation of Human Rights. Yeah.
I didn't have the permission to translate it.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Wow. So there is some inter-office kind of pressures. How, as someone who has been on the receiving end of these, kind of pressures, if you were in the position of power, how would you eliminate this and change the minds of those who are making these decisions?
If there are some officials from the any ministry or from any senior government official that oppose the idea of the results of this report, I would recommend them to say it to me, and I will make a news story that there is a report from an international respected organization said so and so, but there is some officials that oppose this, and there is an official statement from the government saying it's not true and so on. So you are bringing up the news story, you are publishing what had been said outside and also inside. I think that is the journalism that I learned.
Was anyone at the paper allowed to translate this, or this was just not?
No.
Oh, okay. And this was the report regarding the, I'm quoting
Sexual
here, the surge
violence.
of sexual violence perpetrated by the security.
Yeah.
Okay. And I guess in terms of harassment, what, as a female and as a journalist, you're facing this on a daily basis. I've interviewed quite a few people. What is it that you do to kind of keep yourself from not necessarily avoiding those situations, but to prevent yourself from being on the receiving end of those situations?
In the street?
Yes.
I have to think more than once. What would I wear in such a protest or anything in the street that maybe this outfit would not be suitable in the street. So no, I will just wear a skirt and so on, and maybe I would not have a huge or load makeup and so on. So you have first to look at yourself, and you have to be like invisible, not eye-catchy for the people, like you said. Then, like Alia said, you went like an uncovered agent and just trying to ask what happened and so on. And if you feel that the people are not so much polite, or the circumstances that you are in, it's not so much comfortable for yourself, you leave. I think so.
And this is kind of a question for all of you, but I'll start with Alia. You raise an interesting point. I recently interviewed Shahira Amin, the former news anchor for Nile TV, and she was in Alexandria at a women's empowerment group, and she actually has a really interesting quote that I want to read to you. Just a few days ago, I was in Alexandria at a women's empowerment group. Within one working group, we were examining the way forward, moving from recommendation to actual empowerment on the ground. A lot of the older generation kept blaming the women for the way they dress. So we have this generational gap that needs to be overcome. Do you agree with that? Do you think there is some sort of a generational gap? And if so, how is something like that to be bridged and overcome?
Actually, it's not just the generation gap, it's the mentality of the society that blames the woman for everything that happens. It's always the way she talked, or the way she's dressing, or why did she walk at this time of the day, why did she walk in this street and she knows that it's busy or it's crowded. So it needs more effort, whether through education or culture and several aspects. It's not just, of course, the older generations, and I wouldn't like to generalize things, yani. But yes, of course, it's about the older generations. They have this mentality, but also the society itself is having this problem regarding women, and there's also this the religion influence in Egypt. I wouldn't say that it's the Islam or the Christianity that is the reason, but the wrong explanation of them is leading to this. So it needs more effort to be done.
And Lindsay, what do you think about the generational gap? Obviously, you have sort of a unique perspective, sort of being on the outside looking in, but also part of the group, so you're also on the inside. You get kind of the best of both worlds. What would be your perspective on this?
Yeah, I do think that there is a generational gap. Obviously, I don't have older Egyptian female relatives here, but I've heard colleagues tell me that sometimes their grandmothers or older women will say, oh, they're just flattering you, even a comment like that. And regarding the clothing, yeah, I'd really like to challenge that statement. I think as long as we even discuss women's clothing as a part of this issue, we're blaming the victims. What kind of men are we raising where they feel comfortable going out in the street and harassing women? It doesn't matter what we're wearing. We should be able to walk like that at any time of day or night and feel safe.
And I actually would pose that to you, because that brings up an interesting point. You had talked about, we started this point talking about how you're very careful about what you wear, and you're very aware of kind of just almost like being a ghost is what you described, that you don't want to be seen at all. And I think Lindsay brings an interesting point that by we're essentially blaming the victim when we say it's what they're wearing. Do you agree with that, or do you think women should be able to wear what they want and be able to walk out without having that type of harassment?
Yes, of course. I'm totally with that. Yes, of course. But I'm talking about while being a journalist, to do your work, you have some safety issues that you have to bear in mind, and think more than once about your safety. And you have to go back to the newspaper to write your story that you are risking yourself to do. So you have to think more than once who I will meet, what I will do, and I can ask some journalists or colleagues that had been before me in these circumstances or in this area during the day. Is it safe or not? Is it okay or not? There is some police officers or not? There is something to cover, first of all, or not? So everything, just you have to prepare yourself. Just it's your safety, and you have to go back and write a story and tell the people what happened. So you have to do what it needs.
And is there a generational gap? Have you encountered that? Do you believe there is this kind of an older mentality versus a newer mentality?
Yes, I think so. And the issue that Alia bring on the religion factor, I think it plays a huge role nowadays. Now the political turmoil that we are in from the Muslim Brotherhood and from the Al-Sisi government and everything. So the people, if you had seen anyone with that looks like an Islamic person,
Mm-hmm.
you wouldn't know. I would not talk to him. Maybe now some police officer would arrest him. So I will not talk to him now because I might be with him in the police station or so. So yes, generational gap and the other aspects that providing them, I think. Yeah.
And I did want to bring up, I don't want to delve into it too much, but Reem Magid, who is widely considered one of the most ethical and best journalists in Egypt, along with some of her counterparts, left broadcast journalism because of some of the restrictions she was encountering. She recently returned to broadcast television with her show that was specifically focused on celebrating Egyptian women and their successes. That show has since been removed by the government. No reason has been given, so we really can't discuss that aspect of it. But have any of you been able to watch either of the episodes that aired?
Yes, I had watched the both of them.
And what did you think of it? I mean, what I saw, it was really an interesting show. I'm a bit confused as to what would pull or cause the government to want to pull it off the air. But what were your thoughts on the show itself?
The truth till now, it's not clear, even from the administration of the channel, or from Reem Magid himself, or from the government. Mm-hmm. The three parts of the story. But I watched they said in some news websites that the episode of Iman Hilal, the female photojournalist in Masr that had brought the anger of anything. And I think, and I would recommend this story because Iman showed some photos that would not permit it to be published in our newspaper, and I know this information that she had covered Rab'a al-Adawiyya and some revolution and some protests in the streets since 2011 till now, and there is so much stories that had been never published, and she comes to talk to me and said, "Come, Bassant, and see my photos because people would not see it, and I would like you to see it as a colleague itself. I want some opinions because I'm only capturing and nothing is published." And she isn't a pioneer photojournalist in my eyes because she is very successful and she had been so much scholarship around the world and she keep learning and keep traveling and keep exploring everything. So I trust her eye. So when I watched the episode and see the photos, I felt that something gonna happen because the Rab'a al-Adawiyya story itself, the photos, it weren't permitted in any newspaper, and it was first time to be shown on a TV like Reem Magid and on TV and Deutsche Welle as well. It's not a small thing in my eyes. So I don't know what happened, but I think the problem is not with the opposite as long as the problem is with Reem Magid herself.
And you brought up an interesting person, Iman Hilal. She actually stated in a recent New York Times article,
yes,
quote, "Her male colleagues tell her that she will probably never marry because no man will accept her, quote, working in a man's job." I mean, it's kind of astounding that sort of thought is still out there. But have you encountered that, and what would you say to someone who said that to you?
Me encounter to not.
Any sort of, yeah, that type of mentality, you know, that you are working in a man's job and that you're not going to get married because you're working in a man's job.
Yes, my mother. Yes, she said so. She said when I'm being a journalist, and now she's telling people Bassant is just a senior translator on Masr Youm. She's not a journalist.
Oh wow.
Yes, she's afraid.
Wow.
Yes, and now I'm engaged. Now I have this part, and yes, I have my man. So that's fine. But
congratulations.
yeah, it's fine. But the idea that you would not get married and everything, and that's the psychological issues that we are raising in the union, that you are a woman and you are allowed to do anything you would do, and as long as you want to do it, just do it. Don't bear in mind any mentality or any societal factors, or even your family. When I went in the street on the Friday of anger, from the first step that I went to the newspaper, every single person told me, Bassant, call your mother. She is just calling everyone, and there's no mobile phones, so she is calling on the landline, and she's calling on this office, on this office, on this office, please bring me Bassant, please bring me Bassant. And I was like a child or anything like that. And also I had a problem, yes, and she wanted to make sure that I'm fine and so on. But the idea that you are a journalist and you may face, like I said, some sexual harassment and sexual violence. Oh no, I will not marry this person or this woman, that anyone in the street, any stranger, touch her or anything like that. Oh, come on. Yeah. It's not like that.
May I add to this?
Sure.
Because I once, when I first started working in the Middle East news agency, one of my colleagues told me it wouldn't be easy to find a husband, and I asked him why, and he said because you have a strong personality and it's not just about being a journalist. It's about the mentality in Egypt that women must be inferior to men. They shouldn't discuss with them or to have a conversation or say, no, I don't agree on this or that, or to have her own opinion. It's this thing about the society itself. Yeah. So if whether she's a journalist or just an ordinary employer in a bank, it's the same. The society refuses that the woman has a strong personality or has her own ideas and opinions. So it's something with the society itself. Mm-hmm.
And I'll bring it to you. I've personally encountered with my family, when they hear I'm in Egypt, especially, not necessarily my parents, but distant family, like, oh my gosh, what are you doing there? Is everything safe? Is it all right? They really have a complete misconception of what it is like here. What is it like for you with your family? You're traveling into places that I haven't even been, with the Tahrir and the revolution. I mean, that even for Egyptians was dangerous, much less for a foreign correspondent. What do you say to your family when they, get worried about you and raise that issue?
Honestly, I try to reassure them, but they've had to just get used to it over time. There's no other way to do it than that. I mean, when I came in 2008, it was relatively safe here. That wasn't the situation. And then all of a sudden, I was here during the revolution and covering it. And I tried to tell them at first that I wasn't going out to the streets. And then they saw interviews with me on local newspapers that I was. So that didn't work. And my dad's gone completely gray in the past few years.
Actually, a globalized world, you can't even escape from across the ocean.
You can't. They've been really supportive and they've gotten used to it. Of course, people have a lot of questions back home, and I think that's only natural because of the way the revolution is portrayed and Egypt is portrayed on TV there. Of course, US TV stations aren't covering Egypt when there's nothing going on. So it looks like when they are covering it that the whole city's on fire, even though you can be in one neighborhood completely safe, not even knowing what's going on somewhere else. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I can just say that they've gotten used to it, and I try to go home for frequent visits. But I actually want to tag on to the previous question,
Please,
if I may.
Of course.
At Mada, Masr, and Egypt Independent, both, I've worked in an office of predominantly unmarried Egyptian women in their 30s or late 20s, which is sort of a paradox. It's not the average experience in Egypt, though perhaps it is for journalists. And I know it is an issue for them, and they just keep on doing their jobs, and it seems to be something secondary for them. And I'm proud of them, and I hope that they would be happier with an open-minded man or unmarried rather than give in to this stereotype
Exactly.
of they shouldn't be a journalist or shouldn't pursue a career that they want or have strong opinions just so that they can find a closed-minded husband.
Would you both as Egyptians agree with that?
Yes, of course. We need this. We are praying for this dream to come true. That yes, for me, for Alia, I think
Thank
Alia
God
is
I'm married to an open. He's a photojournalist, so he
so he
understands
so he knows.
what I'm doing. So
yes.
And I wanted to ask, in regards to the union of, I'm going to get this wrong, Union of Media Women in Egypt.
Yes.
How can people contact you who are interested?
It's on our Facebook, the same that you have pronounced it, the Union of Media Women in Egypt, and also you have there is some photos of us, the co-founders, and we have tagged ourselves to link our accounts, personal accounts, to our photos. So, and the coordination or the responsibilities that every one of us are carrying on, and everyone just they have to message us or anything, and we will help.
So if they search Union of Media Women in Egypt on Facebook, they'll find you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you all for being here with me today for this very
Thank
important
you.
discussion. I think it's something that needs to be ongoing and continued so that a lot of these issues that we've discussed are better explored and alleviated in a more equitable manner. Thank you all so much for watching today. We really appreciate you being with us. Have a wonderful day.